today.
I'm excited to be here.
And we're going to go ahead and get started. What we're going to do is we're going to take questions at the end of today's webinar. If you look to the right of your screen, there's a dashboard there, and then down below the bottom you see a little button that says questions. If you just click on that little button, the little screen will pop up. You can type your questions in there. We'll take your questions at the conclusion of today's webinar. So with that, we'll just go ahead and get started. Brian's going to be back and clean up today. I'm going to do a short PowerPoint today. It's going to be about 20 minutes, 25 max. I'm going to talk a little bit about some final housing numbers in 2013. I'm going to talk a little about what the market trends are suggesting for 2014. I spent a lot of time in January just doing webinars on the market condition in 13 and what we expect to see in 14. I'm going to do an abbreviated version of that this afternoon. Going to talk a little bit about the three biggest hedge funds that are out there buying investment real estate. One of the things I did at the end of the year last year is I spent a lot of time towards the end of 13 just analyzing what was going on in the marketplace. And really the most powerful things that I read was coming from the hedge fund groups, the Blackstones, the Warren Buffett groups, the John Paulson's group. So I'm going to just feature that a little bit, going to talk a little bit about what those folks are doing, what they see for the market in 2014. Then I'm going to do the top 10 reasons to buy and hold real estate in 2014. There's a lot of strategies out there. We know there's a buy and flip strategy, but the buy and hold strategy really is what most people are gravitating towards in 2014, although flipping is back as well. We can talk about that if you'd like. I'm going to spotlight two markets today. I'm going to spotlight Birmingham, Alabama, and also Memphis, Tennessee. We are in a number of other markets now. If you want more information about that, we are in a number of markets, but we're just opened up Memphis, Tennessee this last week. So we're going to talk about Memphis. We're going to talk about the keys to buying. I get asked all the time, what are the keys to buying in this market? We're going to talk about that. Then just show some example inventory, and then we're going to welcome Brian Davis. So with that, I'll just go ahead and get started. This is the latest Case-Shiller 20-city home price index for 2013. And this number here is pretty consistent across the board, whether it's Case-Shiller or whether it's CoreLogic or whether it's Trulia or RealtyTrack. The number that you see reported is 12.5%, 13% is what the market across the United States climbed in 2013. So we saw a solid 12% increase in housing prices in 2013. We did certainly see some markets that did go up more than that. Las Vegas is one that went up 29%, which is the reason why it's very difficult now to find inventory in Las Vegas. I actually saw the first portfolio I've seen in about 6 months, decent portfolio, just in the last week in Las Vegas. Prices up there 29%. Interestingly, and this is again what you're going to see across the board, the markets are up, but every statistical analysis says that it's still way below the previous peak. Now this says 47% lower than they were before the housing market collapsed. That's market dependent. Some markets are still lower than that. But even though the market is improving, it has climbed, the reality of it is we're still way below market value. Places like Denver, Dallas hit record levels in August. No city saw a decrease in housing prices across the board. Most every market saw some increase, as slight as they may have been. I think the one that the area that grew the least was like the Baltimore, Maryland area, Pennsylvania, some pockets in there where you saw the least amount of rebound. But for the most part, across the board, you've seen an increase in housing prices. I pulled this off CNN Money back in July, and this is what we've seen really through the end of all the way through the end of 2013. Total number of foreclosures coming out of the markets are decreasing literally month by month. We're just not seeing as many foreclosures on the market. There's still a lot of inventory out there, but we're just not seeing as many foreclosures. In June of this last year, that was the lowest amount of foreclosures to hit the market since before the housing bubble burst in 2006. RealtyTrack reported over a 35% decrease in the numbers of foreclosures across the board. This is really interesting, and I pulled this off for a very specific reason, and we know what the answer is, but just to give you an idea, it used to be that banks using the short sale method to liquidate inventory was a very, very popular thing for banks to do to get rid of inventory. You're not seeing many short sales anymore. Here's the reason why. Most of the buyers that are in this market are cash buyers, and the banks know that. And these are some really powerful statistics from RealtyTrack. I'm talking about the number of transactions that were made nationwide that had no loan recorded at the time of the sale. So these homes were purchased cash. 44% of all sales were reported being paid in cash, a 33.9% increase in the same time last year. The percentage of cash sales in September of 2013 was 45%. And then you look at some of these other states, and of course these are states where we have a presence, and at least in a few of these, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Michigan, Ohio, as high as 65% and up to 49% in places like Ohio. Those were homes that were sold cash. Now, You ask yourself, well, who is that? Well, those are the hedge fund guys. We're going to talk about that. But there are also people like you that may be interested in buying a single-family residence for your investment portfolio, your retirement portfolio. People recognize the value in real estate. They're buying real estate as an investment, which is why you see so many homes being purchased right now. Cash, we sort of asked ourselves this question about 18 months ago now, when we started to realize that in the market that we were in, we realized that the hedge fund guys had joined the market. Birmingham's one of our markets for a number of years now. We used to consider that a sleeper market. All of a sudden it wasn't a sleeper market anymore, primarily because the big hedge fund buyers recognize that those pockets have great value. And I really like this kind of cartoon, the hedge fund guy, specializing in highly complex derivatives and exotic financial instruments for the discriminating investor, and then he says buy gold. Well, it sort of frames the notion that, the hedge funds, the investment groups, the real estate investment trusts, these folks see buying investment real estate as the best place to have your money for a number of reasons: cash flow, appreciation, tax benefits, but also the fact that they just basically see that as being the safest place to have your money. It's in a commodity. It's an asset that creates income. It's going to go up in value. So they see that as the best place to park their money. So you see these larger investment groups in this market. I'm just going to talk about three of them real quick just to give you some ideas what's going on out there. Blackstone's the largest. They're the largest owner of single-family residences in the United States. They own 31,000 homes. They're in 13 markets. They're the largest opportunistic fund, real estate fund ever raised, $13.3 billion. We deal with Blackstone. We do sell them inventory. If you don't know about Warren Buffett, Warren Buffett was famously interviewed about 2 years ago on CNBC, or MSNBC rather, and they asked him the question, is buying a single-family home a good idea? Is it a good investment? He went into this kind of a long explanation of why it's the best place to put your money. And then he made a quote. He said, I'd buy millions of them. I'm not very handy. And what he was saying was that, to do this, you got to be able to identify the inventory. Then you got to be able to find people to rehab it. Then you got to have a management company take care of it for you. So Warren Buffett, being Warren Buffett and recognizing that real estate was a great place to park his money, he went out to real estate. He bought that in Prudential Real Estate in October of 2012. It's now called Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. I'm sure they're going to still fly under the flag of Prudential because of the branding, but he now owns Prudential Real Estate. We have talked to a couple of their buyers, one here locally in Newport Beach, and their role and focus is to find single-family residences, if you would, that meet their buying criteria and buy those homes as part of their investment portfolio. And then finally, John Paulson, he was the guy that accurately predicted the housing market was going to crash back in 2006, bet against the market, made a lot of money, went back in and reinvested millions upon millions of dollars buying single-family residences. If you Google any of I could speak about these three institutions and what they're doing and how they're doing. I could talk about that for over an hour. But if you go to their websites or you just Google these guys, you'll read all about what they're doing in the marketplace, how Warren Buffett is completely saying that first slide I showed said, and that is it's recovered, but it's still got a long way to go before it gets back to where it once was. So what's their strategy? Now, everyone's got a different buying criteria. In other words, if you were to talk to any of those groups, they would say, yeah, Charlie, here is my buying criteria. This is what I'm looking for in an investment property. And, they'll vary slightly one from the other. Maybe some will say we won't buy homes that are older than 1970, or they'll say we have to have a 3-bedroom, 1-bath with at least a carport. They'll have criteria. But in terms of their investment criteria long-term, it's all very, very similar. This quote comes from Jonathan Gray, who is the CEO of Blackstone, and he just says, that they feel the market will remain bullish for 2 to 4 more years. We agree with that. We think that in some markets, depending on the pockets, easily a 2-year run, in some cases maybe 4, even a 5-year run in terms of buying at the right prices, and that's the key. We'll talk about that later. But what's their strategy? Their strategy is to isolate key markets for growth, so pick the right market, renovate the property, don't put more than 10% into that property, and that's a critical component. That is where most groups make their mistake. They buy something for $50,000, estimate a $10,000 rehab, and it ends up being $25,000, and it throws their model into chaos. That's where people make their biggest mistake. Don't get into something that has this massive remodel to be done. And then sit on them. The houses have a 94% occupancy rate. Rental market's a great place right now, and they're trying to build a long-term business. That is all. There's only one hedge fund that I'm aware of. They're called Buy PD out of Utah. They're the only group that I deal with that flips. They buy them, and they flip them immediately to an investor. All these other groups are buying it for a buy and hold portfolio. And so people ask, is this the right time to buy? A lot of folks I mean, this is a true statement. I've had people attend my webinars for almost 4 years now, and they still haven't bought anything yet. They're saying, wow, but is it too late? You know, the market's gone up. I don't think it's too late at all. If you look at the institutional buyers, they still see as this the best place to put your money. I happen to agree with that. Frankly, I think that there's better inventory on the market now, and that the infrastructure of the groups that manage these properties is way more refined now than it was even a couple of years ago. Okay, so now I'm going to do the top 10 reasons why to buy, and hold real estate. Now, this is from Ken Corsini. I read his blogs often. This is from June of last year. I've also took some of this stuff as the same type of strategy that the hedge fund guys use. This is a very similar, 10 reasons why buying and holding real estate in this market is a good strategy. And number one is appreciation. Just the fact that you're in a market, if you buy in the right market, you certainly would be careful in a place like Vegas. It's had a real big bounce. You certainly want to be careful in a market that I live in. I live in North Orange County, California. This market here, many people think is a bubble. Buying at the right price is key, and gaining that appreciation is the number one reason. You want to buy in a market where you know you're going to get at least a 7 to 10% minimum yearly appreciation in that real estate. And when these hedge fund managers look at markets, when you see them in a market, you should strongly consider being in that market, because if they're in that market, you know they did all the analysis they could do to determine that that market's going to appreciate over the next 5 years to where you can get a nice rate of return. So appreciation is the number one reason. Second is passive income. Turnkey real estate's key, and that's buying something as an investor that's completely finished, rehab done, preferably rented, but at least rehab so that a tenant can be installed quickly. But being able to just walk out to your mailbox or having that money sent back to an Accuplan each month, back to your 401k or your self-directed IRA, building that account back up. But that passive income is important, and the key to the passive income piece is quality property management company. There's lots of markets you can buy in where you can get good rates of return, but if you can't find good property management teams, that investment, those rates of return will diminish because you won't have your property taken care of to the standard it should be. But number two is passive income. Number three is high leverage. You know, yes, it's true. If you were to walk into a bank and ask for a loan for $800,000 and you were going to secure it with $200,000, and you were going to invest that money in gold or stocks or mutual funds or commodities, that bank is not going to give you that loan. On the flip side, buying real estate, if you want to buy 10 houses, you need $1 million, and you can qualify that through a bank. That's a great way to leverage your money. Now, I will tell you that most people, matter of fact, no people that I've dealt with buys in this market by taking out a loan. Now, we've seen people partner up with family members. We've seen people, take seconds out on their homes. We've seen them do that. But in terms of getting a non-recourse loan for an investment property, it's highly unusual. I frankly don't even recommend it. We talk about that if you like to talk about non-recourse lending. Number four is high ROI. Number one was appreciation. Number four is high ROI. I will tell you that one of the keys is, if you're going to buy investment real estate, is you want to buy in a market where you get both. You get both a year-to-year high rate of return. Our goals are always 12% or higher. We'll show some examples a little bit later on. But you want to be able to buy in a market where you're going to get at least a 12% cash-on-cash yearly rate of return coupled with high appreciation. So you want to look for both. There's some markets you get one or the other. For example, in Atlanta is a good example. In Atlanta, you can buy great real estate in Atlanta. It's a great market, great economy. The problem is there that the ROIs are extremely low, less than 10%, but the appreciation in some pockets can be high, 10, 12, 13, 14%. We would try to find markets that have a combination of both ROI and appreciation. Principal pay down, again, won't really apply to most of you unless you're going to leverage it through a loan. Principal pay down essentially means you took out a loan, but your loan's going to be paid down by the tenant. The tenant is going to be paying that loan down for you, so you have a tenant that's paying off your loan, essentially, principal pay down. In most people's cases, they pay cash or they buy it through a 401k or a self-directed IRA. In their cases, that money is going to go right back to their IRA. It's going to go right back into their checking account or wherever it goes. But their advantage is that you're getting 100% of that profit on a monthly basis. Number six is tax benefits. Now, I'm not a tax planner. I'm not a tax preparer, an accountant. But we are going to be doing a webinar next Thursday on the top 10 tax benefits to owning real estate. Now, I did study what those reasons were. I'm going to have a professional on the line that could properly explain what the tax benefits are. There's a ton of tax benefits to owning real estate. I would encourage all of you, if you're going to do that, to learn what all those advantages are. Certainly, it's a hedge against inflation. We're going to see inflation at some point in time in this country. And when we do, owning real estate that you're buying in at a certain price in a market that's appreciating is a hedge against that inflation for sure. Number 8 is increasing rents. Absolutely. You buy a property at X, it's renting today for $750 a month. In a year or two from now, that could be $775 or $800. So your investment, your return on your investment continues to go up. You will read nothing other than the fact that the rental market in the United States is only going to continue to get stronger. And so being a landlord and having tenants in a market that's going to allow you for those rents to continue to increase is a great way to benefit your bottom line. Number 9 is retirement income. Again, this is Brian Davis's area of expertise. He can talk about this and will be here just in a couple of minutes. But retirement income, clearly we see more and more people now. We had one of these a couple of days ago with Lamar Baxter, Accuplan San Francisco, and he was talking about, look what the market's doing. A lot of people out there, they see that market and they say, I've been in it for a little while. It's been a good run. I made some good profits, but I don't want to be in that volatile environment. It's better to invest that money into real estate where I know I've got a stable flow of income with an asset that's going to appreciate. There's a lot of benefits to that, and so that's a great way to build your retirement income or your retirement portfolio. And number 10, creative exits. And by that, there's just so many buyers in this market right now. If you got into this and your strategy was to be in it for 5 years, and a year from now you said, you know what, I lost my job, or my kid needs money for college, or whatever it might be, and you have an event that causes you to liquidate your asset, there's no better time to sell because there's just so many buyers. I mean, you could do anything now from putting a for sale sign in the front yard, sell to an owner-occupant, to sending it out to a myriad of hedge funds that are buying real estate. There's just so many ways to exit. And regardless of what you do in the real estate market, you want to always have a strategy, an exit strategy. When do you want to get out? Do you want to be in for a flip, 3 months in, out, boom? Or do you want to be in for a longer period of time? What's a better strategy for you? I'm going to spotlight two markets just real briefly. These are 2 markets that win. We are currently in a number of markets, but I'm going to focus on 2 today, and one of them is going to be Birmingham, Alabama. This is just hot off the press. This is the top 10 hottest real estate markets in 2014. This is from CNN Money. I just pulled this off about 10 days ago. And this kind of gives you an idea of, what's kind of going on in the Birmingham market. Birmingham was rated number 8. Median home price 174. The forecast gain through September of 2014 is 7.8% between now and September. That's a nice little appreciation. That's probably pretty conservative. I'll do some numbers of what we saw there in 2013 in a moment. CoreLogic expects the same type of thing, above average returns this year, forecasting 7.8 with the 12-month period ending in September. So Birmingham was rated number 8 on the top 10 hottest real estate markets in the United States. They also call it the 8th best, as I just said, the 8th best overall market in the country. They call it the 3rd fastest growing real estate market in the nation. New Wire Investor says Birmingham is the 3rd best cash flow market, and I'll give you some examples of what I mean by that in a few minutes here. If you're curious who number 1 is, by the way, it's Rochester, New York, and I happen to have some inventory in Rochester, New York at the moment. It's very rare to get stuff there, but those ROIs are always in the 17, 18, 19% range, so the cash flows are really strong there. But Birmingham is 3rd in the country. And a lot of that has to do with the revitalization of the downtown district. Some of you may or may not know that Birmingham has invested over $1 billion into the downtown district. This is their new baseball stadium, which just finished a few months ago. A state-of-the-art facility. As you can see, it's right downtown. That whole area there has been revitalized. They've invested a lot of money in parks, the schools, the downtown district, restaurants, bars, movie theaters, that sort of thing. The whole area there has really just sort of grown tremendously with a lot of investment. The Better Business Bureau, though, said that they had more money invested in Birmingham in 2012 than any time in their history. What did it do in 2013? So for those of you that invested in Birmingham in 2013, here's the final numbers. This is from Trulia. These are the final numbers for 2013. The last quarter, September 13th to December of 13 to December of 13, was a decline of 5.9%. Compared with an increase of 14% in the prior year. Now, many of you know that was because during that period of time our government shut down. There was some fear in the economy, and that was pretty much across the board. And every market you looked at during that 4th quarter period of 2013 saw a decrease in home values during that period of time. Now, interestingly, though, for the year, it went up 12%. So we saw a 12% increase for the year, even though we had a 5.5 or almost a 6% decrease during that period of time. It's increased 57% over the last 5 years. Average price per square foot, again, in Birmingham, was an increase of 12% compared to the prior year. So Birmingham, from 11 to 12, saw a 17% increase. Then from 12 to 13, saw another solid 12% increase, and they're projecting another 7% between now and September. The second market we're going to talk about real quick is Memphis, Tennessee. We've been trying to get into this market for quite a while now. We just opened up this market really in the last week. Memphis on that top 10 hottest housing markets for 2014. Memphis was rated number 10. They're forecasting very similar to Birmingham, about a 7.3% increase in housing prices between now and year ending September. Again, that's from CoreLogic. The Memphis Business Journal, just I pulled this article off. They're saying this is one of the hottest cities to invest in, some of the biggest appreciation in home prices in the country. And yeah, you're just seeing a lot of investors in Memphis. There's a number of groups that do nothing but sell Memphis. We've been very fortunate to get access to a couple of suppliers there that are going to provide inventory directly from banks to us. So we're going to get some very good buys. And just to give you some examples, show you a couple of slides here in a few minutes. We get asked this all the time, what's the keys to buying in today's market? And I'm just going to go through those real quick, and then we're going to get to Brian Davis. First thing is you have to buy below market value, and do not buy anything that's not off market. And those two go hand in hand. If you're buying something that's on the MLS, you're just not going to get the best deal. You have to search through what they call wholesalers to get the best deals on the best property. You want to buy well below market value. You want to walk in the door with appreciation when you walk in. That is the absolute key. What that does, it ensures that if you get to a moment where something does happen in the economy, where something slips, and the housing market declines a little bit like we saw in fourth quarter in 2013, you've already got equity in the property. So even if you lose a little bit off it, it's not even going to affect you. You look for both, look for both year-on-year ROI as well as appreciation. Don't just look for one or the other unless you're completely in love with the market. And we do get that from time to time. People say, I want to buy in Vegas. I want to buy in Southern California. That's fine. But if you're looking at it through, just strictly through the eyes of an investor, like a hedge fund manager would look at it, you want to look for places that you get both cash on cash and rate of return and appreciation both. Make sure you've got your infrastructure in place. Make sure your property management is in place, and make sure that they are qualified. We work with a number of different groups now. We don't just work with one. We work with a number of them, and we do that for a very good reason because performance is the key. But the property management really, after you've purchased the property correctly, that is the key to your success. And then understand what you want to accomplish. What's your long and short-term strategy? You know, are you in it for a flip? Are you in it to get in and out? Are you in it for a year, 3 years, 5 years? Have a definite strategy when you walk in. And by the way, that will also help us assist you in identifying the right opportunity for you. And then number 6 is buy below market value. I know that was number 1. It's also number 6. I can't mention it enough. That really is the key piece to success in the long-term buy and hold market. To give you an idea, buy and holds can go as low as 33. I do see properties less than that at times. I do have some inventory in Atlanta that sells more in the $20,000 range that has some pretty decent cap rates. But those are rare. Those come along only once in a while. Those aren't the typical type of inventory. So it's 33 to about 100,000 for a buy and hold. You want to always come with a 1-year home warranty. You want to make sure your property management in place. I've mentioned that a couple of times now. And you want to make sure the house is fully rehabbed. That's kind of a new rule. It's got to be rehabbed. You don't want to do anything that isn't already finished. Unless you're doing a flip. If you're doing a flip, that's one thing. But if you're doing a buy and hold, you want to make sure it's finished. And you want to make sure the valuations are below market value. You want to make sure you got equity when you walk in the front door, and that mailbox money is, you know, in your mailbox every month. You know, you walk out there and you got your rent check for your cash flow for the property. That's your goal for owning buy and hold real estate. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, and it's Brian's show. These are just some examples. This is what a $50,000 house in Birmingham, Alabama sells for. It's a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, built in 1978. It's selling for $49,900. Now you can see all the average comparable properties. Trulia said it's worth $51,000. The average selling price for that house is $60,000. E-appraisals is $77,000 on it. At a $49,000 investment, if you look down to the bottom line there, the ROI, it was marked up originally at $59,900. At $49,900, that makes that investment somewhere around 14.5% ROI. So nice ROI. You're buying under market value. That kind of gives you an idea. This is just a little bit larger home, just to give you an idea. And I really put this up here to give you an idea of what the rehabs look like. So this gives you a pretty good idea. That's a standard rehab: new flooring, paint, new fixtures, cabinetry, tiling, cupboards, that sort of thing. That's a little more expensive property. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. It's a little bit bigger. That's an 1,800 square foot house, actually. But you can see here it's going to rent for more. That's going to rent for about $800 a month. So when you get down to the bottom line, that's about a 13% rate of return on a $52,000 investment. Again, appraisal, Zillow, well under market value, I should say. So you're buying it well under market value. Yeah, sure. Could you flip something like that? Yeah, you could. You could buy something like that and flip it, hold it for 12 months and flip it. That's not a horrible strategy. You could certainly do that for some quick income, but it gives you an idea. Now, this is Tennessee. Now, in Memphis, you're going to buy a little bit less expensive. They're not going to be in the 40s and 50s. So prices here is going to range anywhere from the high 20s to probably the mid-50s, and that would be a larger house. Because if you get it as an idea here, this is a 3-bedroom, 1-bath in Memphis, selling at $35,000. It's 1,600 square feet, which is a pretty big house actually for a 3-bedroom, 1-bath house. And your ROI, and that's 15%. And again, you can see at $35,000, it's below what ePraisal, Zillow, and Trulia has it listed at. And then the same type of thing here on Mark Twain, 36,000, 3-1, 1,400 square feet. Again, 15% ROI, cash flow on a house like that, with the appraisal valuing at $50,000. Got one left, and then we'll move on to Brian. This is another example in Birmingham. Again, this gives you an idea of what the rehab looks like inside. 3-bedroom, 1-bath. Again, that's selling at $49,900, and Zillow's got it at $75,000, Trulia at $79,000, and ePraisal at $53,000. So it gives you some ideas. That's what a $50,000 to $35,000 to $50,000 investment would buy you in terms of a single-family investment property. And I put this up here for a reason. I did these webinars on Tuesday, and somebody asked the question, when you say ROI, is that net or is that before you pay your expenses out? So I want to give you an example. Those are all nets. So in other words, you got your rent, you got your taxes, you got your insurance, you got your management fee, you got your net monthly cash flow, and then you've got your net. So when I quoted a net number, those are net. Those are net ROIs, not before you pay out your property management, your insurance, your taxes, and all that sort of thing. So that just gives you an idea. So with that, that's my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Brian. We're going to hand Brian the controls. In the meantime, I just remind everyone that we're going to take questions at the conclusion of today's webinar. So if you want to type your question I'm going to type your questions into the queue there. We'll be glad to take those at the end of the webinar. And Brian, again, I want to thank you for being on with us today.
Thank you. Learned a lot. Nice to see you're opening up some new markets. And I learn something every time we do a webinar together. We've been doing webinars for about 2 years together, Charlie and I have. So thank you, Charlie.
Well, thank you, Brian. It's been great, and it's good being on with you again today.
Yeah, and happy to get 2014 rolling. I can't believe it's almost mid-February already. Again, I'm Brian Davis with Accuplan. I'm based out of San Diego, California, but I can work with anybody across the country. Sometimes using this GoToWebinar service, my colors will freeze up on me, so if it does, I apologize in advance, but hopefully it won't. A little disclaimer while I'm getting started, a legal mumbo-jumbo here. Accuplan, we're a third-party administrators. We are not financial planners, broker-dealers, so please consult with all your financial professionals before entering into any type of investment. So we're just a third-party administrator, kind of work as, for real estate folks, an IRA escrow company, and I'll explain more how that kind of works. So a little bit about Accuplan. We're a third-party administrator. We have our own trust company. That trust company is called American Estate and Trust. It's based out of Las Vegas, Nevada. And that's what allows us to be a custodian of an IRA, and then we at Accuplan do the administration of that so you can direct all your investments. A little bit about my background. You could say real estate's been in my family for generations, as I come from a farming background. My parents are rice farmers up in the Sacramento Valley in Northern California. I went to college at UC Santa Barbara and moved down to San Diego not too long after that. And in 2002, I got into the mortgage business. And from 2002 through 2007, I was doing loans, and things were booming, especially here in Southern California. I mostly was working in a builder division here, so new construction or condo conversions, and I was doing subprime loans for that. Well, in 2007, the market hit pretty hard here in Southern California, and subprime loans went away. People building down here went away. It's starting to change now, but forced me to look at some other directions, and in 2009, I started doing self-directed IRAs, and me personally have opened up about 1,000 of these ever since. So those of you that might not know about self-directed IRAs, you're not alone. Most attorneys and accountants, they really know the security side of IRAs. And that's because when the ERISA laws were passed in the 1970s, and that's the law passed by Congress that said, hey, you have to have a custodian, you can have these IRAs. Well, that field, as you probably know, is dominated by the investment banks, the banks and insurance companies. Those companies offer, here we go. Sorry, I knew my color scheme would do something here. Those companies specialize in securities, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, those types of investments. And that really left a big space in our field where people could come and invest in what's allowable under IRS guidelines. So we'll get into that in a second, but going back at the end of 2010, and I probably need to get this slide updated since the years keep trickling by, there's $4.7 trillion in IRAs and another about $12 trillion, that's trillion with a T, in 401ks and profit sharing plans and those types of plans. Only about 2% of those are in a truly self-directed vehicle like with an IRA with a company like Accuplan. What we're seeing at Accuplan and other custodians like us are these types of investments: real estate, notes, investments in private companies like private funds, and precious metals. Now, my background's real estate, so I mostly deal with folks investing in real estate, notes, and private companies. And some of those private companies are investing in real estate. But you can invest in just about anything. This list here is just an example of different things you can invest in: raw land, lease options, water rights. There's never been a list by the IRS of what you can invest in, just what you cannot invest in. And the IRS only listed two things. And those two things are life insurance contracts and what the IRS deems as a collectible. And this is a list of some collectibles according to the IRS guidelines. And there's even some exceptions you can see here of stamps or coins. With coins, there's certain minted gold or silver eagle gold and palladium bullion coins that you can do with your IRA. Another thing you'll hear is S-Corps. IRAs can't be a member of an S-Corp, but that's an S-Corp rule. S-Corps only allow natural persons to be members of a S-Corporation. So IRAs can loan money to S-Corps, but they can't become a member of an S-Corp as they can some other type of corporation or entity. So it's not all that simple. There's also what's called prohibited transactions. So besides this life contract, your IRA can't get involved with some certain disqualified persons. And for anybody that really loves reading tax law, you can look up Internal Revenue Code 4975 and look at the rules here. And here's kind of a general breakdown of Internal Revenue Code 4975 as it outlines disqualified persons and prohibited transactions. The basis of the law is there's no self-dealing. And besides yourself, you can't deal with your spouse or family members in lineal ascension and descension. And by that I mean parents, grandparents, children, their spouses, grandchildren, their spouses, and somebody that could own a corporation of that. That's the basics of it. Again, there's some more to it, but this is the basics of it as it comes into play. So if you get involved in one of these prohibited transactions, the IRS can disqualify your IRA from January 1st of the year that took place. So if you bought a property, you paid your college-age kids to paint it for you, that's a prohibited transaction. So the IRS could go back if they were to audit you and find out and disqualify that IRA, and that could have some huge tax consequences for you. So let's play a little game to kind of get this a little more clear. Everybody probably remembers the game Deal or No Deal that was on NBC a few years ago. So let's play along, and it's a little different with the webinar as opposed to a live seminar, but we'll give it a shot here. So can your IRA lend you $10,000, deal or no deal? That one is no deal. That's self-dealing. So your IRA cannot deal with yourself. And what about your brother? Can your IRA lend your brother $10,000, deal or no deal? That one is deal. He doesn't fall in that category of straight up and down. He's side to side. I don't make these rules, folks. I just try to help interpret them for you. But what about your stepson? Can your IRA lend your stepson $10,000, deal or no deal? This one's deal. If it was your son, it would be no. But stepson, I guess the lack of blood relation there makes it a no deal. So it can get kind of tricky. I got one more for you guys here. What about your daughter-in-law? Can your IRA lend your daughter-in-law $10,000? The answer to that one is no deal. Again, your children and their spouses. So try to know these rules. Contact me if you have questions about any transactions your IRA is looking to get into. because you don't want to get involved in a prohibited transaction. So let's get to the fun side of this. How do I put money into a self-directed IRA? Well, self-directed is really a marketing term. Really just means we have IRAs that allow all range of investments that are allowed under IRS guidelines. So putting money in one, we have traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, SEP IRAs, and solo 401ks. It works just like if it was with a brokerage house IRA. So if you have an IRA with another custodian, we do what's called a trustee-to-trustee transfer. Transfer that cash assets from the other company, move it over to us. There's no tax consequences, and that allows you to have more control of your retirement. If you're an employer plan, like you have an old 401k plan or 403b or 457, you can do what's called a direct rollover. You contact your plan administrator, direct them to roll those funds over to an IRA with us, and then go from there. Big question I get here is, what about my current company's retirement plan? Can I move those funds over to an IRA? The answer to that is maybe. If your plan allows for what's called an in-service rollover, then you might be able to move those funds over to an IRA. Now, that's not the norm. The norm is when you're in a retirement plan, those funds are kind of stuck in there until you leave the job or you leave the plan. But some plans do allow indirect rollover. So ask your plan administrator, your HR person, if your plan allows that, if you're looking to do some investments into hard assets like real estate. Your other and final option of putting money into an IRA is making an annual contribution. Now you'll see I still have the 2013 limits up here, and that's because you have until April 15th to make contributions to these plans, and in some cases October 15th. So most people fall into the category of being able to contribute to a traditional or Roth IRA. You're limited to $5,500 a year. If you're over the age of 50, you can throw in an extra $1,000. Now, a traditional IRA is what's called a pre-tax IRA, meaning the contribution you make to the plan, you're being able to write that off your taxes. Similar to how a company qualified plan generally works. When you put the money into the plan, you're not being taxed on those dollars, and they grow tax deferred, meaning when you take those funds out of retirement, you're going to get taxed on that as earned income after that time. The Roth IRA works a little different. You put the money in, you're not being able to write that off on your taxes, but it grows tax-free. So when you pull those funds out at retirement age, you don't have to pay taxes on that as earned income. So there's some big benefits there. Now, a SEP IRA is for a self-employed individual and possibly their employees. You're allowed to contribute up to 25% of your gross income into a plan. And now the SEP IRA works just like a traditional IRA, and it's pre-tax. Another plan that you'll see here is a simple IRA. A simple IRA is similar to a 401k, but it falls under the IRA guidelines. And this is for small businesses and allows employees to contribute to their plan and the employer to match a little bit. And again, the contributions are pretty small. The other method you'll see is a 401k plan. Now, for those of you that are self-employed and have no W-2 employees, there's a part of 401k plans that allows for your company to have its own 401k plan, and because you have no W-2 employees besides maybe yourself or your spouse, you are the administrator of the plan and the trustee of the plan, meaning you can control your own 401k and not have to have a big TPA service come in, and so our plan allows you to invest in things like real estate. And I'll talk more about that in a second. Another point I want to talk about is the checkbook IRA. Some of you guys might be familiar with that, might not. There was a case in the 90s called the Swanson case. And the Swanson case had a gentleman by the name of Swanson who started an international corporation that his IRA dollars funded that he was the manager of. That kind of sounds like self-dealing. The IRS came in, or the Department of Labor, I should say, they're the ones that overlook these types of things, came in and said, oh, that's a prohibited transaction. But the court ruled in Swanson's favor. And so that set up a precedent which started this checkbook IRA kind of whole side industry where people could take their IRA dollars, create an entity that their IRA is the owner of, and they could manage, as long as they weren't taking any income from it, and invest from that entity. So a lot of times you'll see this via an LLC. With an LLC is a pass-through investment if it's a single member entity, so there's no federal tax return that has to be filed. However, you will have to pay state taxes, and depending on your state, those fees can be small or large. If you're in a state like California, there's an $800 fee to have an LLC in the state of California, plus something called a gross receipts tax. Gross receipts tax is if you're doing transactions, buying and selling properties, let's say, on your gross receipts, you're going to pay a tax on that, not your net receipts. So you can even lose money and owe the state of California some extra funds. So that's why with an IRA, a business trust might be a good model for you. Now, a business trust works like a partnership in that it's a single member pass-through entity, so there's no federal return. But because it's a trust, you don't have to worry about paying the franchise tax board and paying that gross receipts tax. So I have some more info on the business trust if anybody has questions on that at retirementcheckbook.com. Going back to the solo 401k. Now, similar to the checkbook IRA, this solo 401k is its own entity. It gets its own tax ID number. And like I mentioned before, you're the plan administrator and the trustee, as well as the plan participant. So you wear a lot of hats when you have this solo 401k. So just like a company 401k, you're the plan participant. You're the employee of your company. And it doesn't matter if you're a sole proprietor or if you've incorporated. You can invest directly into real estate from this plan. So you can set up this plan, one-time setup fee, invest directly with no annual fees, which is a little different fee structure than the IRA. Some people still do set up an LLC or a holding trust to do investments, but that would be something you might want to talk to your CPA about. Most people that I deal with are investing directly from their 401k that can have this structure. Not everybody fits the box of having the solo 401k. So this graphic's a little convoluted, but you can create this 401k. You can roll over any pre-tax retirement dollars you have in other IRAs or 401ks, and then you can make annual contributions, which are a bit higher than an IRA, and then go invest directly from there. Some benefits of the solo K. You can loan yourself money. So different from the IRA, as you can't loan yourself money because you're a plan participant in the plan, just like a company 401k, you can loan yourself up to 50% of your plan assets or $50,000, whichever is less. So you can loan yourself money, and you pay back your own retirement plan. And you can buy real estate just as we talked about here. The IRA is a little bit different. It's what most people are accustomed to. You can open up an account online with us. Then we work on funding your account, and that's the longest part of the process. That can take anywhere from a couple days to a couple weeks. So if you're going to get into it, you need to open your account and work on funding it. Then you direct us to fund the investment. We're about a 24 to 48-hour turnaround on doing so, and then we hold the asset in your account. That's pretty much it. It's a description of how to invest in some alternative investments like real estate with a retirement plan. Here's my contact information here. And Charlie, that's all I have. Let me know what questions we might have here.
Awesome, Brian. Thanks so much. And again, that's always a ton of information. I learn something new every time you do that, so I really appreciate it. And Brian, one thing I want to say to you, thanks so much for all you did last year. We had a number of clients that used Accuplan last year, and they're extremely pleased with your guys' service. I want to thank you for all the work that you did last year, and looking forward to 2014.
Me as well. Thank you.
Okay, let's see here. As we're loading up the questions in the queue, for those that are curious, we did record today's webinar, right? We did record today's webinar. So if you'd like a copy of the YouTube video, just let us know, and we're more than happy to send that out to you. We do have a couple of questions here. Okay, first question, Brian, would be for you. I've never been asked this question. Do you have an appraisal done every year on the houses you buy using your IRA or 401k?
That's a great question, and this is the time of year that this question pops up. So when somebody reaches the age of 70 and a half, they're required to take what's called a required minimum distribution from their IRA. Every year, the IRA custodians are required to submit a 5498 form to the IRS. This 5498 form to the IRS needs to address the value of the IRA. When it's with a brokerage house or insurance company, they can look up on December 31st how much was, these stocks in this account worth, and they can easily do the record keeping for that and supply that to the IRS. Well, with companies like ours, we have to report this third-party value to the IRS. Now, it's not as big of a deal until somebody's in that R&D phase where there's tax consequences involved. So every year we send clients, hey, is this the value of your retirement account? And generally going off of the purchase value of it. Now, we highly encourage people to supply us a third-party valuation of that property or asset, but we don't require an actual third-party appraisal until somebody either does a Roth conversion, which is converting their pre-tax dollars to a Roth, or they're 70 and a half or older and there's a required minimum distribution involved. When they're in that R&D phase, we do require that the IRA pay for an appraisal on that property, but not until then.
Okay. Okay, can you buy real estate that you already own into a self-directed IRA or 401k plan? Let me read that again. Buy real estate you already own. I think what the answer to the question is, Brian, if you already own real estate, can your IRA buy that?
No, that would be a prohibited transaction. That would be self-dealing, buying it from yourself. So that's a no-no. You can't buy property that you currently own. And the government's made their way to not allow people to find some people have tried, well, what if I sell it to my cousin Joe or my buddy Bob over there and then buy it from him? If the IRS thinks that you're just trying to circumvent the rule, they can still come back, say that's a prohibited transaction, and disqualify your IRA. That's not a route you'd want to go.
Okay, this one's for me. Can you talk more about the other markets that you were in? Okay. I've been doing some consulting work in Birmingham for a number of years now. Memphis, obviously, we talked about today. We've rolled that market out. The only other markets I'll refer somebody to is a market there, as I talked about in the webinar, is markets where we have infrastructure. And what I mean by that is just strong property management. So those markets would be as follows: Atlanta, Detroit, and I know Detroit sounds funny, but man, Detroit's got some great values right now. Orlando, Florida, Kansas City, Missouri, and there's some areas in Ohio. So those would be the areas that I would refer somebody to. There's others. Rochester, New York, I mentioned Rochester, but you very rarely get anything in Rochester. I mean, there's not enough inventory down there to even make that, to even spotlight that market. The cash flows are really strong there, but I get property there every couple months maybe. I got 2 now, but that's really unusual. If there's a specific market that you're interested in, then let me know and I'll see what I can find out for you. Have you had any problems with tenants not caring for the homes? You get that occasionally, but that's not a massive problem. I mean, you will from time to time get a tenant that doesn't take proper care of the house. There's a lot of controversy around Section 8 tenants. Frankly, I think Section 8 tenants are the best tenants, because if you get a Section 8 tenant, the housing authority goes in there occasionally to inspect the home to make sure that the home is livable. If there's any issues with the home, it has to be repaired. Now, if the tenant does that, the tenant is very well aware of the fact that if they do damage to the home, they're going to be the ones responsible to have it repaired, and if they don't, they could lose the property, which means they would lose their Section 8 voucher, which is the last thing a Section 8 renter wants to do, is lose their voucher. Other people think, well, I don't want to put that Section 8 tenant there. The government's paying the rent, but the tenants won't be high-quality individuals. They might destroy the property. It actually works the opposite. The fact that they're there is going to, really protect the property better than even in some cases just a normal tenant. Are you in Texas markets? Why or why not? You know why not? I'll tell you. Great answer. And I have messed around with Texas a couple times, and here's the answer. And I actually learned this from Lori Graymont. Many of you know I've done many of these webinars with Lori Graymont from Summit Assets Group. Lori hosts a radio show up in San Francisco called Real Estate 360. I've been a guest on her show a couple of times. I learned this from her. She was in the Texas market for a number of years and got clobbered there. And she got clobbered there primarily because the taxes there is really prohibitive to be a secondary. If you're a homeowner there, you don't reside in the state. There's tax issues there. And she explained to me she just couldn't make the ROIs work there because in other markets they didn't have those tax ramifications, and that's why she wasn't there. If somebody wanted Texas, I can refer you to Texas all day long. I mean, Texas, I mean, Austin, San Antonio, not Dallas so much, but Austin, San Antonio, Houston. I see inventory there all the time, and I have people approach me all the time with inventory there. But as I talked about, what I try to do is when I refer somebody to, to a seller, to a wholesaler, is to ensure that you're buying a property that's at least a 12% cash-on-cash return with at least a 7 to 10% appreciation yearly. So I try to stay out of those markets where you can't do that. In some cases, Texas just doesn't return that sort of cash-on-cash rate of return. But again, if you're interested, give me a call. I can certainly bring you to some folks there. Okay, Brian, I do not see any more questions on the board here. We'll leave the numbers up here for a few more minutes. If anybody would like to call myself or Brian, we'd love to talk to you. We'll leave our numbers and email addresses up here. I want to thank everyone for being on today. Again, we're going to do another one next Thursday about the top 10 tax benefits of buying real estate. And Brian, whenever you're ready to schedule another one too, we can talk about that. So check your schedule and get back to me.
That sounds great.
Okay, I think that's all the questions. Everybody, thanks so much for being on with us today. Again, I always hang around my office after these webinars to take phone calls, so if you'd like to chat, give us a call. Brian, thanks again so much.
Thank you, guys, and look forward to doing one again with you guys next month.
Sounds great, Brian. Look forward to it. Take care.